you so much for joining us today, and I am absolutely delighted to tell you that sitting next to me in this chair is the one and only Mr. Christopher Paolini. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is absolutely wonderful. Now, Saturday, 550,000 copies of your book were bought. How did that feel?
It's amazing. I mean, I'm delighted that people are actually finally reading the book. I spent so long working on it. Sometimes it felt like it would never be finished. So it's just wonderful, and I'm really just grateful that enough people have enjoyed the story that I'm able to continue writing, and I've been able to make my career as telling stories.
That's phenomenal. It really is. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 24 now, and actually I'm just going to be turning 25 in November.
Okay, and you started writing Eragon when you were how old?
15.
15.
So actually this November is going to mark 10 years since I started the series.
Oh my gosh. Now you were homeschooled, and when you got your diploma, you felt like you had the gift of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the homeschooling allowed my sister and I to sort of move at our own pace through school. Mm-hmm. And because also we didn't take any summer breaks, I ended up graduating early at 15. Mm-hmm. So the time where I normally would have still been in high school, I didn't have a job, I didn't have a car, my parents felt I was too young for college. So, I had a lot of free time, and I was living in a rural area. And in order to entertain myself, I decided to try to write the sort of story that I enjoyed reading myself.
Wow.
And that became Eragon.
Did you think you would publish it when you first started to write it?
Never, never. I didn't even know if I could actually write a whole book. So that was really the challenge that I had set myself with Eragon. And in fact, I actually viewed Eragon when I started as a practice book. Oh. And I thought that, okay, I'll write a practice book, then I'll go write a real book. Mm-hmm. And I thought that at the most, maybe my parents would read the book, and if I was really lucky, my sister might read it.
Is she older or younger?
She's 2 years younger than me.
Okay, okay.
And she's kind enough to let me base a character off of her.
Oh.
Her name is Angela, and the character in the book's called Angela the Herbalist.
Oh, wow.
Was based off her.
That's great.
Fortunately, she has a sense of humor about it.
That's great. So did you grow up in Montana? Have you ever lived outside of Montana?
I lived briefly, well, I was born in California.
Okay.
And I've lived briefly in Alaska twice.
Oh, wow.
But the majority of my life I spent growing up in Montana, pretty much uninterrupted since 1986. So it really is my home.
And we were talking about, I told you I had just been out there 10 days ago for the first time, the incredible wide open spaces that you have. Do you think that has influenced you at all, given you room to kind of be who you are, or?
Yeah, I mean, of course, every morning when I wake up and I look out my front window, I get to see the incredible Beartooth Mountains and watch the light shifting over them. We have all these animals in the area. There's moose and deer and elk and bears and bald eagles and golden eagles, and just it's wonderful. And I think that if I'd grown up in a city or in a more developed area, I might still have written fantasy, but it would have been fantasy of a very different kind, probably more of an urban setting. I know when I come out east, and people tell me, we've left this town or this city and we're in another one, and to me it feels like we're still driving in the same city.
Yeah, right. Well, I'd like to get into your books now, but before we do that, let's take a short break.
Whatever we deny or embrace, for worse or for better, we belong together.
Underneath everything we are, underneath everything we do, we are all people, connected, interdependent, united. And when we reach out a hand to one, we can influence the condition of all. That's what it means to live united.
Don't walk. Don't walk. Walk. Do not enter. Hot dogs. Definitely like hot dogs. Motorcycle club. Everything must go. Ghostly ghouls. Don't look at that, Teddy. Body piercing. Ouch.
Everyday moments can become teaching moments because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
You used the word wonderful. And I really feel as though you have done something with your books, which is to connect our kids with a sense of wonder, and that I think they're really looking for. And I think that's part of the pulse that's beating in there that's really drawing them. What can you say? I mean, I'm sure you hear from your fans. What are they reacting to? Are they able to tell you?
It's different for every person in many ways. One of the things I like to do when I'm signing books is to ask people what their favorite part of the series has been. And the range of answers is really amazing. Of course, I get a lot of young male readers who just love the battles and all the blood and gore. But the answers vary from the landscape in the books to the characters to the emotions. You mentioned a sense of wonder. I personally think that the world we live in and the universe we live in is one of the most wonderful things I can imagine. And so I'm always trying to read nonfiction, listen to college courses on tape, and take interesting pieces of information about our world and work them into my fantasy world.
Oh, wow.
And it makes it a lot richer, and it makes it a lot more interesting. So I think the appeal, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think the appeal of the books is partly lies in the world itself, but also in this, you know, very classical coming-of-age story that Eragon's going through, which, of course, many young people can really empathize with. And I know that's, of course, that's what I was going through at the time I wrote the book, so it was really a perfect synergy there.
That I wondered when you sat down to write the book, if you had a sense of Eragon's character, like fully, you know, who you wanted him to be when you began writing.
His character was a little amorphous at the beginning, partly because I wasn't sure if I could actually get through the story. And in the beginning, I think he was very similar to me. I mean, I had a feeling for how he was different from me, how he was his own person, in that he'd done a lot of things that I hadn't done. He was used to hunting on his own out in the woods. He'd grown up on a farm, being very self-sufficient. And as I wrote the book, I found that he became very much his own person as he goes through these experiences that I've never gone through. One of the great things about fantasy, I think, is that you can sort of externalize a lot of the internal feelings that we have. So that if you're scared of a spider in a fantasy world, you can meet a giant spider. And what Eragon's going through, the sort of struggle of growing up, I was able to bring in these external elements and show them as physical conflict, for example, or you know, he loses his family and he's sort of thrust out into the world, and that's a very, in some ways, exaggerated version of what happens to many young people when they go to college or move out of the house, get a job, and then have to figure out how to live on their own and how they're going to be an adult.
I was going to ask you how, you know, that you took away everything he had, everything he knew, you know, and he didn't, like, despair. He turned and he went on his quest.
Well, he despaired for a few minutes.
Okay. We'll make him human, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've discovered that, in my own life at least, that the best thing you can do is to keep moving, you know? It's when you stop moving and when you start thinking too much in some ways, or you despair, that you might as well be dead at that point. And the reason so many hero stories and coming-of-age stories have the family get killed or have the main hero being an orphan of some kind is because that when you have a support system around your main character, those people tend to do things for the character because they're older and more experienced. They can do them better than the character. And if someone like Eragon is to grow up and to become really the hero that he needs to be, he has to learn to do this stuff on his own. Mind you, in my own life, I'm enormously grateful for the support of everyone I've had around me. And I'm sure I couldn't have done what I did without my family and my friends. But in Eragon's case, you know, he has to learn to fight on his own and to use magic on his own and also to make decisions on his own, which is something everyone has to learn how to do.
What you talk about the magic, and I thought it was interesting that you brought in the telepathy. Any reason why you did that? Because it almost makes him more than human, you know?
It's actually established within the world that telepathy is not that uncommon within Alagasia. It's something that you might be able to do, and even if you couldn't use magic, you still might be able to use telepathy, and that shows up even more in the later books. And the reason I did that is because I said that if a world existed where it was actually possible to manipulate energy with your mind, which is what magic is, they're manipulating energy with your mind and directing it to do what you want. If it was possible to actually do that, then telepathy would be a very, very minor form of that and very easy to do in some regards. But the main reason I introduced telepathy into the world was so that Eragon could communicate with the dragon Saphira. I wanted her to be intelligent, but I didn't want her actually talking with her mouth like an animated movie. It seemed ridiculous.
Okay.
So
Cool.
she and Eragon share a mental connection, and it also helps them to understand each other more than they would otherwise.
Oh, any reason why she's a she?
Because otherwise, in the first book, the four main characters would have all been male. Eragon, Brahm, Saphira, and then later Murtagh. And that's just boring. And it introduces a nice little bit of conflict with Eragon, that he has to try to understand her point of view, and she has to understand his point of view. And she gets a little jealous with Eragon as well when he starts noticing a woman, for example.
What is a dragon for you?
Physically or mentally or just in general?
Well, how about mentally, or even beyond that? Is it a symbol of anything for you? Do you experience dragons as like just power, or?
You know, dragons have represented so many things throughout history. You go back to early, especially European myths, and they tended to be very, very evil creatures. But if you go back even further, you'll find a lot of creation myths that have dragons involved, with dragons that were, the mothers of the earth or something. And I think I treat the dragons in my world two different ways. On one hand, they're simply sentient creatures, and they're flesh and blood like every other creature. But on the other hand, they have this mythic element about them that transcends the ordinary. They can fly, which they really shouldn't be able to do. It's obviously a bit of a magical ability. They can breathe fire. Sometimes they can use magic if the moment is right. And they often have a wisdom beyond their years or beyond their experience. And to me, if I had to keep one magical element in my books, it would be the dragons. Because that's really what brings the world to life.
A sense of wonder and power, sort of the mystery that's out there, that big mystery.
And just seeing something like a dragon in the world that is just so out of the ordinary. In the books, the dragons have scales that are gem-like, and they flash and sparkle. And I'm just thinking, like, in a pre-industrial civilization where you wouldn't see a lot of glass or anything like that, to see a creature like that flying above, and I'll be honest with you, I'm glad dragons don't actually exist, though.
Why?
Because we'd all make excellent food for them.
We wouldn't be around to see them, huh?
No. And personally, I don't believe all the old stories about knights or swordsmen actually being able to kill a dragon. I'm sorry, but I've watched our cat eat mice, and if we were smaller than a mouse compared with a dragon, it's
not
over.
a chance.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Oh, that's great. Well, what about a hero for you? Do you have a hero in your own life, your own world?
Well, I admire my parents a great deal. I think they're extraordinary people, and they've been great role models for me my whole life. So they're certainly heroes for me. I admire the authors who've written the books that I've enjoyed.
Such as?
Oh boy, we could be here all night if I go into that. But authors such as Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, Anne McCaffrey, who wrote the Dragon Riders of Pern series, Jane Yolen, the guy who wrote Hatchet. I forget that.
Gary Paulson.
Gary Paulson. Yes. All the books that I've enjoyed, and I'm mentioning mainly ones I read growing up here, but I think that anyone who manages to write a good book is a hero in my eyes.
Yeah, right.
I admire people who really stick up for what they believe in and who have the tenacity to achieve something in this world.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, let's talk for a minute, if we can, about some of the things that you took on in these books. You've got, searching for the higher power. You've got being a vegetarian. You've got, I was struck by the scene when Eragon kills, and what that would have been like for you as a young person to write that scene. You want to pick any of those and whatever your favorite is and talk about it for a minute?
Well, I'll say right off that the views and beliefs of my characters are not necessarily my own views and beliefs, but writing Eragon was my way, and the other two books as well, has been my way of explaining the world to myself.
Oh, gosh.
And that's another reason why I read a lot of these sorts of books growing up, and why I think many young people do, because when you're growing up, you're always searching for answers for how to behave and what's right in the world and what isn't. And these stories serve as blueprints for life. And that's exactly why I have Eragon dealing with these sorts of large questions and large things, because to me, that's what makes these stories interesting. If Eragon were to simply walk into a battle and kill a bunch of people and have no feelings or thoughts or repercussions about it, then he wouldn't be human, and the story would be much poorer because of it. There are stories that do that, and they usually do it very consciously, like the Conan the Barbarian stories, for example. He doesn't care about his enemy. I mean, he'll slaughter a whole legion and he'll laugh about it at the end of the day. But that's his character, and he really is something almost superhuman in a ways. But that's not Eragon. Eragon feels these things, and it's interesting because he goes through an evolution, because in the first book, he really only kills Urgals, which are these sort of monsters in the books. And he really doesn't have a problem with that because he views them as, they're not human, they're rather ugly, and he has no problem fighting them. But then in the later on in the series, he ends up actually fighting humans, and it has been sort of forcing him to reevaluate his whole approach to this struggle that he's in, and whether or not it's the correct thing to do.
Wow. What about the search for the higher power?
I think that's something that, every young person, if they're, really intelligent, asks themselves about at one point or another. I think it's something many people ask themselves about at one point or another. And the great thing about a fantasy world is that I was able to. I can create all these different belief systems that Eragon can encounter along the way, and that's something that's touched upon a little bit more in my third book, Brisingr.
Okay, and do you hear about that from kids?
Tends to be more from the older readers, to be honest with you. Maybe it was just me thinking about this stuff at that age, but no, I do hear from it quite a bit, and it's interesting because. Since the series isn't complete, sometimes people make certain judgments about it and I can't spoil the rest of the series for them, but I think, just wait till you read the next book.
Yeah, right. It's coming.
Then you'll have a completely different view on this.
Oh, wow. Well, when you started Eragon, did you have a framework in mind for all 3 books, or now 4 books? You did.
I did, because if I write without plotting out a story or a book, I get writer's block. I'll write 4 or 5 pages in, and then I just sort of stall out because I don't know where I'm going. So, since I wanted to finish Eragon, in fact, I'd started Eragon 3 times before I wrote it. And one of the versions I did was actually set in this world. So the key idea of a young man finding a dragon egg appealed to me enormously, and I really wanted to try to write a book about it. So I spent about a month in 1998, and I plotted out the whole series from start to finish.
Oh, wow.
Not all the little details, but all the main details.
Yeah.
And then I plot out each individual book in even greater detail before I start it. And so, for example, the series was originally supposed to be a trilogy, but the third book got so long that I had to split it into 2, so now it's 4 books. But the story itself still hasn't changed.
Do you write every day?
I do. Especially when I have a deadline. I'm not the fastest writer around, so I have to be very disciplined with my writing if I hope to, finally finish a book.
And how does it come to you?
Well, I mean, of course, occasionally there are those moments of blinding inspiration, which are wonderful, but they're pretty rare and, you know, they don't happen too often.
Okay.
And even when they do happen, that sort of inspiration doesn't last much more than a day or two, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
So most days I go in and I just say, I'm going to try to do the best I can. And whether or not I feel like actually writing, I sit down and I still write at it. And that's the best way to get through a book.
How long do you give yourself?
Well, if I don't have an imminent deadline, I'll usually work from morning to early afternoon, stop, exercise, and then work more in the late afternoon. If I have an imminent deadline, I grab breakfast, sit in my computer, and get up an hour before dinner to exercise.
Oh, wow.
And do that 7 days a week.
Wow.
And work in the evenings.
Oh, jeez.
So...
Now, is this your calling? Are you going to write for the rest of your life?
I'm going to tell stories for the rest of my life.
Tell stories.
Whether or not that means writing books for the rest of my life, I don't know, but I will be telling stories the rest of my life.
Okay. Wow. And they made Eragon into a movie.
They did.
Did you work with Hollywood at all on that, or were you involved?
I offered my advice whenever they asked for it, but... And I think it's fantastic that a movie was made in the first place, because so few books are ever adapted into movies. But ultimately, the film represented the studio and the director's vision of the story, just as the books represent my vision of the story. So people can seek each of those out and decide which of them they like best.
So if they see the movie, they still better come back and read the book?
I would certainly hope so.
Okay. Now, how about Eldest? Are we going to have a movie for the second one?
To be honest, I don't know at the moment.
Okay.
That's sort of up to the studio.
Okay. And do you have a title for the fourth book?
I do.
Ooh.
But I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Now, you have gotten to go overseas into Europe, right, for promoting your books? And how have you been received by the people over there? What's that been like?
It's been wonderful. I was been to Britain twice, and then had a tour in Europe for my second book, Eldest. And the fans were wonderful. Although it was interesting because they all behave a little bit differently in each of the countries. Some countries, people are a little more self-restrained, a little more polite, or reluctant maybe to ask questions during a presentation. Other countries, I know when I was in Italy, they don't stand in lines at book signings, so they all just sort of mob the table at once. But I had a fantastic time over there, and I certainly hope to go back soon.
Oh, that's really exciting. That's really great. Do you have another series in mind? Or, I mean, is there another book, like, growing in you when you finish this?
I have a whole bunch of books all plotted out that I want to tackle after I finish the series. But not a series, because, I mean, I've been working on this almost for 10 years now, and to be honest, a series just takes too much time.
Oh.
So I want to try a number of different genres. I obviously won't abandon fantasy, but I want to try my hand at, science fiction, thriller, mystery, horror, romance.
Oh, that's great.
Everything.
That's great. Now, what did you read when you were growing up? Because I've talked to you a little bit before we started this, and your knowledge base is huge.
Thank you. Well, I'll read anything if it's good. I mean, I have an obvious preference for fantasy and science fiction. But, I mean, my mom would read Jane Austen and Dickens to my sister and me when we were growing up. And I love reading fiction and history, that sort of thing. I read all the Tom Swift books when I was growing up. I read the Nancy Drew books. I read, of course, obviously a lot of fantasy. A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Fantastic book, and the 2 sequels were great as well. David Eddings' Magician by Raymond E. Feist, another good coming-of-age fantasy story. The Mossflower series.
Oh, yeah.
So actually what happened was I had gotten a fantasy book from a local store, and it was the middle of a trilogy, which I didn't know at the time. So I read that, and then I went to my library to find the rest of the books, and after I read all of the books written by this author, I was standing there thinking, how do I find more? And so 2 shelves down, there was another fantasy book, and I read that, and then a few shelves down, there was another fantasy book, and I just sort of moved my way through the shelves like that. And when I'd pretty much read all the fantasy in the library, that's when I started writing.
Oh, wow, you needed to make your own.
Exactly.
What do you think of graphic novels?
It's funny you ask, because I just bought about 4 or 5 graphic novels yesterday to read on book tour. I think they're great when they're done well, because they're sort of a perfect marriage between images and text. They tend to be simpler. The stories they tell tend to be simpler than novels, just because of the nature of the format. I do a lot of art myself. I drew the dragon eye and the map inside the books.
Wow.
So I also love to read them just from an art standpoint.
Do you have a favorite series?
I've really enjoyed the Astro City stories, which are sort of a retelling of the superhero genre. It's very, has a good heart in it, I
Oh,
think.
good.
But I'll read anything.
That's great. Well, I know we were talking about what are the last 3 books you'd read, and didn't you say corks and something
Orcs,
about
actually.
and something about engineering or
Yeah.
something, you know? So that's a pretty deep science base. Do you have reluctant readers ever approach you and say, "I never wanted to read a book, and then I found Eragon," or?
I have, and I also have heard with letters from teachers, librarians, and sometimes parents where they've said that Eragon was sometimes a book that got a young person to start really get into reading. And to me, that's one of the most gratifying aspects of this whole experience, to know that what I wrote maybe is helping inspire other people to read and write more on their own. And whenever I have someone tell me that, my first reaction is to say, well, that's great, and you need to read this, and this, and this. And if someone's having trouble reading, what I've found, the reason is usually because they haven't been exposed to the sort of literature that they really connect with. So often we're sort of force-fed in school, okay, you have to read this, you have to read this. Okay, I had to read Wuthering Heights in high school.
How was that?
I hated having to read it. It's not that the book was bad, it's just having to read it made me hate it. And oftentimes what other people like is not what you like. I mean, high school usually doesn't assign fantasy books, for example. So, go to your library, get a wide range of things for your kids or for yourself, and, find what you like.
Yep. Amen. Absolutely. We are absolutely of like mind there. Well, your books are so powerful. They're so wonderful. There's such great depth and so many great themes in them. And just as a librarian, I want to thank you for writing them and tell you how much I admire you for taking the risk and going out there and doing that, because that's just fabulous. And you have really shown other people your age what you can do.
Well, and that was one of the most difficult things starting with Eragon, was I felt like maybe I was trying to do something that was impossible because there wasn't another person my age I could look at who'd done what I was trying to do. After the fact, of course, I learned that there have been other young authors. I just didn't know about them. For example, the author of The Red Badge of Courage was only 19, I think, when he wrote that book. And there have been other young authors as well. But one thing I learned from going on tour with Eragon and going all around the country is that librarians rule the world.
In what way? We need to know.
because they're the ones that are recommending books to the young, in school libraries and encouraging people to read. And I think people really underestimate how much influence librarians have over the reading habits of this country. So, as I said, librarians rule the world.
Well, I think we like to think of ourselves as being people who can open doors, open hearts, open minds, which your books certainly give us a chance to do. And thank you so much for coming to be with us today. Thank you so much for the books. And I hope you all will enjoy reading every one and the next one that he's got coming down the line. And as always, come see us at the library.